Aloha, my name is Dr. Amanda Kelly, also known as Behavior Babe, and I'm going to be presenting a overview of the Introduction to Applied Behavior Analysis. The photo I selected here says change because we are here as behavior changers. We believe that the environment influences behavior and that behavior increases or decreases based on what happens before and after that behavior. We're going to talk about that as we go through this discussion today. Let's begin with an overview, a video from the Behavior Analyst Certification Board on what is applied behavior analysis.
What is behavior analysis? It's about people and the scientific study of their learning and behavior. Over 100 years ago, the underlying philosophy of behavior analysis was introduced. The best way to understand people is to focus on their behavior, the things they do and say. Over the next few decades, this viewpoint inspired a number of researchers who discovered the general reasons why people do what they do. Their core discovery was that the events immediately following behavior determine whether it will be repeated in the future. This is known as the principle of reinforcement. In the 1950s and 60s, researchers began using these discoveries to improve people's lives through behavior change. These efforts led to the development of an applied science called Applied Behavior Analysis, or ABA, the foundation of our modern-day practice. Today, there are tens of thousands of credentialed behavior analysts who help individuals, families, communities, and organizations achieve meaningful behavior change. ABA treatment has shown to be effective in solving problems in a variety of areas. ABA is best known for its success in treating autism spectrum disorder. Decades of research have shown that intensive ABA treatment is the most successful approach for children with autism, and in some cases can eliminate almost all symptoms. ABA treatment has been widely recognized as an effective treatment for autism spectrum disorder by a number of sources, including the U.S. Surgeon General, the American Academy of Pediatrics, and the National Institute of Mental Health. Parent training programs based on applied behavior analysis often teach biological and foster parents the skills they need to create safe, positive, and nurturing environments for their children. Recent research has shown that state-administered ABA parent training programs can keep families together while reducing state costs. In the area of organizational behavior management, consultants improve employee performance, workplace culture, and business outcomes by assessing and changing the work environment of its employees and leaders. A popular specialty in this area is behavior-based safety, which is a widely recognized and effective method for keeping employees safe and healthy while on the job. In dementia treatment and elder care, behavior analysts treat aging-related issues such as memory problems, health issues, wandering, medication adherence, and more. Over the past 50 years, behavior gerontologists have demonstrated that their services can improve the health and quality of life of older adults. These are just a few of the areas that applied behavior analysis has improved lives. And there are many more areas where behavior analysts are working hard to address the world's problems. If you would like to learn more about behavior analysis, visit the following websites for more information.
You'll notice that that video gave us a little bit of information about the history as well as some of the concepts. Let's elaborate in our discussion. Applied behavior analysis is based on the 7 dimensions. The 7 dimensions are 7 defining characteristics, and they are as follows: generality, effective, technological, applied, conceptually systematic, analytic, and behavioral. Get a cab is a short acronym if you put all of them in order, GETACAB. That might help you remember them. When we talk about generality, what we mean is that we want to see behaviors that we're working on, that we're helping an individual acquire, or that we are helping them reduce if it's a behavior that we need to decrease, but that the skills that the individual learns can be demonstrated across people, places, and time. And ultimately, we want to see the behaviors and the skills that are demonstrated in situations other than where they were taught, or with different people, different places, and across time. When we think about something being effective, we often think about, did it work? So when we're thinking about describing something as being effective in short words or a quick description or phrase, I would ask you to think, is the data going in the desired direction? Are the behaviors going in the desired direction? So behaviors that we're looking to decrease, are they going down? And skills that we're looking to increase, are they going up? We are looking to see that change is occurring, but we're also looking to see that it's occurring in a reasonable amount of time. The rate of learning matters. So if we wrote for you an objective or a goal that said that your child or student, or that you are going to be working with an individual and currently they cannot sit for very long periods of time at a table. In 1 year's time, you say that you want them to be able to sit at the table for 15 seconds. Is that meaningful? Is that effective? Would that be a demonstration of an effective program if in 12 months we were only able to increase 15 seconds? In many cases, I would say that that's not an example of a robust goal or objective or aim. So although the intervention might be increasing the child's time in the chair or at the table from 5 seconds to 10 seconds to 15 seconds, and one could argue that the intervention was effective, we would also want to note that maybe the teaching procedure wasn't efficient. So the amount of time that it takes to acquire the skill is also something we want to look at. And so we do consider the rate of learning. That very much matters for our students. We describe the T as technological, has really little to do with technology, but more to do with the understanding of the principles and procedures and the way in which somebody implemented their teaching strategies or techniques. So if I was able to do something and it effectively resulted in the desired behavior, for example, if we wanted somebody to ask for help and the procedure was written down and described with such clarity that you were able to implement something that I was able to design, even though I couldn't meet directly with you to talk about it, we would say that it meets this dimension. It's technological, it's described in detail, and it's able to be replicated. It doesn't necessarily mean that you got the same results, but it does mean that you understand the teaching procedures and that the methodologies were clear. When you're thinking about reviewing any of the technical research that's out there or anything that's in the journals, it's really important that we look for a robust procedures section or methods section so that we would know how to obtain within reason those same results. If we cannot, then the effects that the authors achieved, for example, in a research study, or the effects that the practitioners achieved or that the students or clients obtained, is something that we want to be able to replicate in order to describe it as meaningful and matching the 7 dimensions or this specific dimension of applied behavior analysis. In a few moments, I'm going to play a couple of quick short video clips, animated illustrations of these 7 dimensions. So let's just continue on with the overall discussion to help prime us for the future information. When we talk about something being applied, that can be really tricky because that's a word that has a meaning outside of behavior analysis, right? I applied for a job. She applied the sticker to the folder. The word applied can mean many different things. Basically, here it means I took what was important to the individual, to the client, to their family, to society, and I applied that to how I prioritized what I was going to help the individual either learn to do or decrease doing and have that replacement skill. So when we talk about the dimension or the characteristic of being applied, we are talking about something being socially significant, being relevant to the client, to their family, to society. And as behavior analysts or implementers of behavioral science, we should be seeking feedback and asking whether or not individuals are happy, are satisfied with the procedures, with the behaviors that we selected, and with the outcomes achieved. I think sometimes we see this happen in practice where a child might want to work on one thing, their parent wants to work on another thing. How do you prioritize? You're still there looking at your client, but in this case, they're both your client. And although we want to help the ultimate recipient of our services, which is that child in this case, we also need buy-in for fidelity, and so that the family is implementing it with a way that will yield us the results that we hope that we could achieve or that we could predict for them. So it can be really tricky, and it's not just black and white or cut and dry or easy to do. It's just important to remember and to always say, why are we working on this skill? And if there's ever a skill that you're working on, that you're asked to do, or that you've designed for somebody else to implement, and you don't really know why you're working on it, delve deeper into the research, look back at the assessment where you generated that objective from, ask your supervisor, ask your colleagues, and seek out mentors. We want to be making sure that it's important for our clients. Now, tracing may not seem all that significant, but if it's a prerequisite to being able to write your name, to being able to read, to being able to communicate, then we might determine that, hey, that is something that's socially significant. Why? Because independence is relevant to that client, and being able to trace and to know your letters and to be able to read or to write is a key part of developing that independence. So you, as the behavior implementer, as the behavior technician, or as the behavior analyst, are there to provide instruction and to guide the treatment team, really, or to be a part of that treatment team that is being guided on how we can achieve effective and efficient outcomes that are socially significant and meaningful to our clients, to their families, and to those around them. Here's a wonderful example of how you can take the interest of a client or a potential client and embed it in order to target the treatment objectives identified. Are we working on reading? Are we answering questions? Are we pausing? Are we taking turns? Are we focusing on joint attention? Are we looking at the social or communication aspect? Depending on what those treatment objectives are, we can always find ways to embed the client's interests. Here's one example of doing that.
He don't yet put on his favorite shirt. A boy, big, colorful, round, groovy buttons.
How many buttons?
4.
That's right, show me 4 fingers. 4. Good, turn the page.
My buttons, my buttons, my boy, groovy buttons. My buttons, my buttons, my boy, groovy buttons. Oh no! What? Oh no! Another button popped. One of the buttons popped up and went away. How? Oh no! And one of the buttons popped up and rolled away. How many buttons are left? 3.
Conceptually systematic is another dimension of behavior analysis, and what that means, simply put, is that we are looking to the research. We are basing our decisions on the principles of behavior, what we know about the principles of behavior, reinforcement, punishment, shaping, stimulus control, and extinction. When we say research driven, it means that there's not necessarily an article for everything that we're looking to do, right? Like, is there an article on using tag teaching with acoustical guidance to get an 8-year-old to walk into the school building so that they can make it on time to their speech session, and this individual communicates using sign language only? You are not likely to find an article with that level of specificity, but you are likely to find repeated demonstrations of either a particular approach or really those replications of the benefits and the components of reinforcement, punishment, shaping, and so forth. In the acronym Get a Cab, this is the second A, the first, of course, being apply. We're now looking at analytic. So how do we know if data is going in the desired direction, if it's effective, if we don't have a measurement? So when we talk about being analytic, we want to know that the data is going in the desired direction. If this is a skill for acquisition, something that we're trying to increase in a learner's repertoire, then we would expect to see that in order for improvement to occur, the visual display would be in an upwards trend. If we were looking at challenging behaviors such as self-injury or negative self-talk or property destruction, of course, we would want to see this visual display going down in intensity or in the frequency of what is being measured for that challenging behavior. And then if we are using the data to then make decisions to inform our programming, to speed up, to slow down, to change a prompt level, to back up, to adapt the materials, to reevaluate, to make sure we have agreement, all sorts of things can be manipulated or can be adjusted in order to see their impact, which we hope is a positive impact on the learner's rate of behavioral change. And we're only going to be able to do that through visual inspection, visual analysis. At least that's one of the defining characteristics of what makes behavior analysis, or what makes a behavior analyst behaving behavior analytically. And then behavioral. So when we talk about a behavior as behavior analyst or in the field of behavior analysis, we're talking about something that's observable and something that is measurable. Negative self-statements is a behavior, but if I can't see it and I can't measure it, then I cannot develop an intervention and I cannot change it or be confident that the change in the behavior that's internal, that's covert, I can't be confident that that's due to my intervention. And if I can't be sure of that, then what's the purpose of replication or extensions? And are we really then relying on science? And so while behavior analysts, we do care about things we cannot see, we just say that that's outside of our realm for impact at this time. Now, there are behaviors, like I said, negative self-talk that we can't see, that we can get some measurement on if we have an individual who can be a reliable self-reporter. If maybe we're looking at a self-monitoring program, but then we're getting the written production of those internal thoughts. If that's the case, then we're getting a written report of those internal thoughts, which is behavior that we can now measure, that we can now see, that we can now observe. We have to, of course, take that leap that what is being reported is also what is occurring in the environment that we cannot detect, that internal self-statement. But when we talk about other things that are very observable, very measurable, you can see how we can take a larger situation and boil it down into something that feels manageable, like there's an entry point for how we're going to intervene or change behavior. Now let's watch a short animated video I made that probably describes that a little bit easier than I did just there.
Hello, I'd like to discuss with you the 7 dimensions of applied behavior analysis, sometimes referred to as ABA. One easy way for remembering the 7 dimensions is the acronym GET A CAB, which stands for Generality, Effective, Technological, Applied, Conceptually Systematic, Analytic, and Behavioral. Or maybe you're just an ABA tech geek, which could stand for Applied, Behavior, Analytic, Technological, Generality, Effective, and Conceptually Systematic. Another fun way to think of the 7 dimensions is the acronym BAT-CAGE, although bats kind of freak me out. Let's take a look at the skill shoe tying and see how it could be taught consistent with ABA principles. If you use video modeling as your intervention, which requires a video model of the skill that you are trying to teach, then you could evaluate its effectiveness in the following ways in regards to the 7 dimensions. Although to some it may seem early to start talking about generality in the beginning of our discussion, I think it makes perfect sense. When we are trying to teach a skill such as shoe tying, we should think about other places where that skill will need to be demonstrated. One such example would be tying the strings on a swimsuit at the beach. Before we can expect to see generality of a skill, we must first make sure our interventions are effective. We are looking for data to be going in the desired direction. Data that is collected is displayed in order to help us make this determination. Technological is the dimension which refers to how we describe our procedures in detail. We must do so that others can implement them and hopefully obtain the same results we did with an effective teaching procedure. Applied is the dimension that refers to the social significance of our behaviors that we select for change, the interventions that we use, and the degree of outcomes that we achieve. In this situation, tying a shoe would be something that is considered very important by the community, parents, and family members, as well as the individuals who are learning to tie their shoes. Say that an intervention is conceptually systematic means that it is consistent with principles that have been determined to be effective as defined in the research. In behavior analysis, these can include stimulus control, extinction, reinforcement, and sometimes punishment. The dimension that we will review here is analytical. Being analytic means to make data-based decisions. In order to do this, data must be collected and displayed. Looking at this chart here, live modeling did not produce an increase or the desired increase in a behavior, whereas video modeling did. The seventh dimension reviewed here is behavior. Behavior must be observable and measurable in order for it to be changed. If we can see it, we can measure it, we can change it. Behavior is not only crying, screaming, or kicking others, but it can also be desired behaviors. It's important when defining behavior to describe what we can see rather than an emotion that we describe for a collection of behaviors. Rather than saying being musical, we might say playing the violin. Or rather than saying affectionate, we say hugging others. Rather than having fun, we say dancing together. These acronyms will prove helpful for many when trying to recall the 7 dimensions of applied behavior analysis, whether that's thinking of someone getting a cab or an ABA tech geek holding a bat cage. You should do whatever works best for you. These 7 dimensions are what all ABA interventions are based upon.
Let's talk a little bit about the ABCs of applied behavior analysis. What we mean by that in our profession are antecedent, behavior, and consequence. When you are thinking about antecedents, what we mean are events or information, instances, occurrences, features of the environment that are happening prior to the behavioral target. So we're going to talk a little bit more, and we're going to go through some examples on a future slide about what is a behavior, what isn't a behavior, to make sure that we're on the same page. But let's just assume for this example, we're talking about screaming behavior. Now, where does that behavior happen? Does it happen at home? Does it happen at school? Does it happen at the grocery store? All of the above? Who's around when that behavior occurs? Is it only happening when one of the parents are with the child? Is it happening only in the presence of a sibling? Is it happening only if a teacher is there? Is it happening with the babysitter and with the parents and with the sibling and at school with the teacher? If so, what activity is happening when the behavior occurs? Are we placing a demand? Are we presenting a new food? Is it just time to take a nap? Is it the first thing in the morning? What's the activity? When does that behavior happen? And what are others? If we're talking about a classroom, what are other students doing when the behavior starts? If we're talking about home, what are the other siblings doing? If we're talking about the park, what are the other children doing? What are teachers or adults doing when the behavior starts? These are what we mean by antecedents. So what has set the stage for the behavior to occur? As behavior analysts, we are describing behavior as any activity a living organism can perform. And then we have also what's known as the dead man's test. Basically, if a dead man can do it, it's not behavior. So if a dead man can lie on the floor, it's not behavior. If I say, hey, that student's lying on the floor and I want to decrease their lying to on the floor behavior, a mannequin can lie on the floor, right? It can just sit there. What behavior are we looking at? Are we looking at when they drop to the floor? Are we looking at when they are moving their body in a different position? Because a non-living organism, a dead man, cannot move his or her body, right? If we can see it, we can measure it, we can change it. That's something I like to say that really helps orient me to why we look at the interactions with the environment. And we care about that because we believe that the environment impacts behavior and behavior influences the environment around it. And if we select some dimension, some aspect of that behavior that we can see, then we have a measurement for it. We have a way to capture it in space and time. And if it's a behavior we need to change, we're going to be able to see if it's changing, if it's occurring in the desired direction, and if it's happening as a result of our interventions. And if so, then we have that measurement to say, yes, this is what happened. Let's continue. Let's improve. Let's teach others. Let's do more of that. And if not, then we don't waste a learner's time. We don't waste our time. And we don't waste people's money on interventions and services that are inefficient and effective. Because if we do, then by just these definitions, we are not being true to the 7 dimensions of applied behavior analysis. How do you define a challenging behavior? I really think we need to conceptualize it as something that interferes with the child's learning. If it results in any harm or self-injury or injury to others, that's a challenging behavior. If you're damaging physical property or a physical environment, that is a challenging behavior. And if a behavior results in isolation socially from others, that's a behavior. That's a place to pinpoint for behavioral change. So here we go. This is the list I was just talking about. I want you to take a moment. We're going to go through it together. Then I want you to read through it. And I want you to identify how many of these things are not behavior by our definition of being observable and measurable. So I want you to look through the list that includes screaming, smiling, a pencil, laughing, happiness, reading a book, hitting, anger, swearing, counting nickels, dreaming, writing on the board, singing a song, raising your hand, self-esteem, sadness, licking, cooking, watching TV, lying on the floor, and strumming a guitar. Take a few moments, read through this, and let's discuss. How many on this first column here do you think constitute behavior? Screaming, smiling, a pencil, laughing, happiness, reading a book, hitting. Those are 7 examples. Screaming, is that something that we can all see, that we can observe, that we can measure? Absolutely. I can hear it if you can perform it. Smiling, if I'm in a situation where I can look at you, where I can see you, where I have access to you, you're in my view, smiling is a behavior that I could see, that I could measure. A pencil, I can certainly count pencils. I can count how many pencils are there, how many pencils are moved from one table to another. But a pencil itself is not an action. It's not something performed by a living organism. It's just the item. So if we were looking at moving pencils or chewing pencils or counting pencils, then moving, chewing, and counting would be the behavior. But a pencil is not. Laughing is definitely a behavior. What about happiness? That's right. Happiness is a state. It's an emotional state, which could be a collection of behaviors. If you're happy, maybe you're smiling, maybe you're singing, maybe you're laughing. If you're happy, maybe you're just cuddling up on your couch and you have a cup of coffee or a warm cup of tea. Maybe you feel happy, but that's something that's internal and I can't measure. And happiness for one person looks different for another. So we're going to want to look at the behaviors there. Laughing, smiling, those might be good indicators or correlates if somebody's happy. Those would be the observable, measurable behaviors to consider. Reading a book, definitely that's a behavior. I can't tell how many words you read if you're reading silently. So reading silently is a behavior I can't measure. But if you read aloud, yes. If I have you complete questions afterwards, I can see that by your answers, so answering questions, I can tell if you're looking at a book. So it depends on how technical we want to be. But whether or not somebody has a book open, is oriented to the book, is turning the pages, and is able to answer questions about the book, we could infer that they had read the book. Hitting a ball, hitting a wall, hitting somebody on their arm or on their body, definitely a behavior. And that topography or the way that it looks could be very different, right? You could be playing baseball and you're using the bat and you hit the ball. Hitting the ball or swinging the bat is definitely a behavior that's performed by an individual who's up at bat. You know, punching the wall. The wall itself is an inanimate object, but the act of hitting that wall is a behavior that can be measured. Think about anger in that second column there. Swearing, counting nickels, dreaming, writing on the board, singing a song, raising your hand. I would say that there are two on this list that are very clearly not behaviors that I could measure, that I could change, that I could detect. Take a moment, review that list, and let me know if you have the same two that I do, or if there's more for discussion, or less. Yeah, the first one is really easy. Anger, right? Basically, you're noticing a trend. If it doesn't end in ing, it may not be a behavior. That is definitely one indicator. Happiness, anger, not in ing, not behaviors. True. And the other one, yes, it's a little bit trickier, but dreaming. I cannot tell if you're dreaming. I can tell if you tell me about your dream, or I could operationally define or describe what I think your status would be, or what your stature might look like if you were daydreaming. But I could describe that much more objectively, such as looking out the window or oriented somewhere other than the place of instruction. And when asked a question, there's a delay in answering or responding, right? That could be the definition of daydreaming. But those are observable and measurable, where dreaming or daydreaming is not necessarily on its own. And the third column, self-esteem, is a very clear one. Doesn't end in ing, neither does sadness, so you can identify those pretty quickly. But there's kind of a trick one in this one. There's a third one that I want you to think about. Is that strumming a guitar, lying on the floor, watching TV, cooking, or licking? Which one won't pass the dead man's test? Technically, I think lying on the floor would be the one that I would say wouldn't pass the dead man's test. It depends. If somebody's propped up on their elbows, looking at the television, or in front of the fireplace, you might be able to describe it, but it's something that somebody could be positioned doing and then just continue doing, then that's not really the most pivotal behavior to select. So even if it is a behavior, is it the best one? If you're lying on the ground when I need you to be walking into a classroom or getting out of a car, then I'm going to describe that as probably a different behavior. And what behavior would I like to see? Walking. What behavior do I not want to see? Falling to the ground. Falling being something that technically a dead person could do, but they would require them being thrown. So that would be also the behavior of somebody. When we're describing behaviors, it's really important that we have clear, concise behavioral targets. So be clear, be objective, and we want to make sure that we're on the same page. So observable, measurable, things that we can see, things that we can measure, things that we can change. Now, here is a quick view of an antecedent behavior consequence, or ABC chart. And often I see them going across, right? So there would be multiple blank boxes there. Antecedents, what are those variables that came before? Behavior, what does it look like? And then consequences. Describe for us what happens after the behavior. Does somebody yell? Does somebody applaud or clap if it's a singing or performing in a play? If somebody knocks on the door, that's a behavior. Does somebody answer the door? That would be a consequence. Of course, answering the door could also be the behavior, except what then comes after that, and who is the individual that we're concerned with. So consequences are not always things that are intended, just like antecedents. I may not intend there to be a lot of questions being asked or a loud volume of people in the room. It might just be part of the environment with a consequence. If somebody bounces a ball across the room and I don't catch it and it knocks over the vase of flowers, consequence could just be that the flowers are knocked off the shelf. Maybe the vase breaks or the glass breaks. But at the very least, there's likely to be water or a very loud clang. Those would all be considered part of the consequences. The questions I want us to consider is, what is the behavior of concern? What are the antecedents? What are the consequences? And why do you think that the individual engaged in this behavior? Or what do you think he gained from the interaction? All right, in that video, which was short and we'll watch again, ask yourself, what is the behavior of concern? What were the antecedents? What were the consequences that occurred after the behavior? And why do you think that that boy engaged in the behavior that he did? Ultimately, what did he get out of the interaction? What is the behavior of concern? There were a couple. Which one did you notice as the most concerning? Did you see an escalation of behavior? If we had intervened earlier, do we think we could have seen less challenging behavior? Why do we think the behavior intensified in only that short period of time? What were the antecedents? What were the students doing? Looked like free play to me, or maybe small structured centers. What occurred as a result of the behavior? What were the consequences? It's going to be very important that you identify which behavior, and there may be multiple. The learner might have stuck out his tongue, and we may have considered that one behavior. Or called out or tapped the learner, scratched the learner. What were the consequences? What happened as a result? The individual that was scratched, he responded. What about the other peers in the environment? Why do you think the individual did, that boy, engage in those behaviors? Do you think he wanted attention? Was he looking to get access to a toy? We might not have enough information. It's important to find out what he did get as a result of the interaction, because that will inform us and will help us understand why the behavior occurred, or actually, more likely, why it may occur or under what conditions it may occur again in the future. Let's watch that video one more time. Do you notice what the other boy, the second boy in red, just brought over to the boy, the first boy on the floor in red? It looks like an identical lizard. So we don't have information. We don't know what was happening prior to the beginning of this video. Think back to the behaviors. We saw sticking out your tongue, hitting, scratching. We saw reactions from the boy in white who was scratched, from the little girl, from the girl in blue, and from the child in the red who came over and delivered the toy lizard. The reason why we care about the antecedent behavior and consequence is because we're looking at taking something that is complicated, complex, and circular sometimes, and we want to break it into a linear fashion. We want to look at it in order. We want to try to make sense or some sequence of what has just occurred in the environment. So the behavior, we almost always see that, right? Especially if it's a behavior to reduce. Sticking out your tongue, hitting, slapping, scratching, biting, behaviors to reduce. Sometimes we don't know what came before because that behavior is what gets our attention, but it might be easier to describe in greater detail what came afterwards. It's important to write down things that were intended, such as, if somebody needed to go out into the hallway if something happened, and that was an imposed consequence by the instructors, by the teachers in that case, you might consider that an intended consequence or one that was delivered by others. But there's also maybe some unintended consequences or just consequences that occurred, whether we intended them or didn't intend them to occur. What happened after the behavior? And all of that matters because behavior analysts, whether that's you or your supervisor, we're looking at identifying the functions of a behavior. And we're not looking at identifying functions of one instance of a behavior because an instance of a behavior isn't a pattern. And without a pattern, we don't necessarily have a problem, right? So we're looking at functions of behavior so that we can figure out why they're occurring and how we can help those individuals get what they need out of the environment and other alternative, more appropriate and socially significant, acceptable ways. When we talk about the functions of behavior, sometimes I ask people to just take a seat. Sensory escape, attention intangible, spell out seat if you take the first letter of each one of those words. When we talk about sensory, we are really referring to things that are automatic or self-delivered. So it looks good, smells good, tastes good, feels good, sounds good. It satisfies one of your senses, and it doesn't require somebody else, doesn't need to be a socially mediated reinforcer. We'll talk about reinforcement more later on in this presentation. Escape. Maybe we want to get out of something. We don't want to do that activity. Perhaps we want to avoid doing things like the dishes around our house. Escape and avoidance are certainly one maintaining function of a behavior. Attention, that's one we're all so familiar with, right? We often see challenging behaviors and we go, oh, they were trying to get our attention. And often they're really effective because, oh, they did get our attention, whether that's climbing really high on shelves, saying really choice words at the grocery store, or just throwing a scene as we're walking out of some family event or gathering such as church. So it can be really, really, really difficult to withhold attention. And I think also there can be the misconception that children will do things or adults will do things and that they enjoy negative attention, or what people might call negative attention. I don't really think anyone enjoys being yelled at, for example, but when you can predict your environment, there is some level of satisfaction that tends to come with making sense of the world that you're in. When we talk about tangible, it means some item or activity. It could be a food, it could be edible, it could be, hey, you do that to get your coffee in the morning, or you do that because I want to have that cupcake for dessert. But often when we talk about tangible, we're talking about access to an item or activity. Now, when we think about the functions of behavior, it's not just one or the other, or two of the three, and can't be three of the four. Often we have a primary maintaining function of behavior, even if a behavior is maintained for multiple reasons. And functions of behavior can shift and change over time. So it's important that when we are responding to behaviors that may not even be maintained by attention, that we're as neutral as possible when appropriate, so that we're not providing dense amounts of attention, and hopefully we're not unintentionally maintaining a behavior from our response. Now let's take a look at this short animated video that reviews for us the functions of behavior. Now, what is reinforcement? When we think about reinforcement, we think about great things, right? We think about, again, being the giver of good things makes you the deliverer of reinforcement. It's important to remember that reinforcement is a consequence. So that occurs after a behavior. It also increases behavior in the future. Sometimes people will say, but he really likes that thing or she really enjoys it. But it's not a reinforcer if it doesn't increase behavior in the future. Or you might find that you have a particular friend that you spend a good amount of your time with them debating or sparring, right? And you think, why do I hang out with them? Sometimes I feel like we're always just debating. But then you do it over and over and over and over again. Then there's some aspect of that interaction or engagement that is reinforcing for the both of you because the behavior increases in the future. Now, reinforcement can be self-delivered, so it can be something that's automatic. Maybe you enjoy having intellectual and stimulating conversations. Maybe you enjoy being around that person. Or maybe it's something that somebody else is delivering. So if it's something that you personally get satisfaction out of, then it's going to be something that's more considered self-delivered, such as humming a song or tapping your fingers or biting on the inside of your lip or twirling your hair. All of those can be really good examples of reinforcement that's self-delivered that doesn't require another individual to be around for. Many other things will require social mediation. Here's an example of an art imitation program that is something that is a challenging skill. It's a task that the individual is learning to acquire. It's a skill targeted for acquisition. However, it's going to be more likely to occur if the individual is motivated. So providing something that's preferred, such as a favorite character or a favorite story, is something that could be considered motivating. Now, if the individual finds the activity and continues to perform the activity in the future, if they find it reinforcing and it's because it's a favorite character, although as the instructor I place that in front of them, it's something that they get self-satisfaction out of. So that could be similar to listening to your favorite song or smelling your favorite scent or seeing a rainbow or your favorite color. Reinforcement can be simple. It can be praise, just saying, way to go, there you go, you've got it. It could be acknowledgement. It could be something that's public. It could be something that is private between the instructor and the individual or the client, right? So let's take a quick moment to see a short example of what contingent praise might look like. So if the behavior is cleaning up or putting the item in the bag, here's what it might look like to just say, there you go, you got it. Praise does not always function as a reinforcer. Again, if the behavior increases in the future, that's how we will know if our response, if the consequence was reinforcing. There you go. Yeah. Whoa, 2 at a time. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Done. Often when we think of reinforcement, we think of rewards. We think of an item maybe, right? Like a sticker or even an interaction. Could be a high five. But oftentimes when people are first learning about behavior analysis, or when children or students or individuals are first becoming recipients of behavior analysis, there is a reliance on primary reinforcers, which can be edibles, which could be things that are, you don't need to teach, are rewarding, right? Like food is rewarding, a drink is rewarding. But over time, we want to be making sure that we are pairing those primary reinforcers with praise, with our excitement, with something that's just so fun. Maybe you find it very stimulating from a sensory perspective. So here's an example of how we can take praise, pair our interactions and even the learning environment with a place that's super duper fun and provide feedback, reinforcement in a way that feels really natural and playful and not so robotic or rote.
Helps us feel better, that's right. What does the teacher do?
Helps us like
Yeah, and what does a baker do?
Cakes and cookies.
Cakes and cookies!
Conversely, punishment decreases behavior in the future. It also, though, occurs after a behavior and can be self-delivered or socially mediated. When we first hear of punishment, we probably think what we've always known punishment to be, which is something that's negative, bad, undesired, punitive. Maybe we think of spankings or timeouts. But in the field of behavior analysis, punishment very technically means a decrease of a behavior in the future. And if it's something that's added or removed after a behavior occurs that results in a decrease in the future, whether it's self-delivered or socially mediated, then that meets the definition of punishment. So, for example, you're driving down the road, you put your seatbelt on, not a problem, but you're speeding and you get pulled over. Now you get pulled over, you get a hefty ticket, a $350 ticket. And now in the future, when you get in your car, when you go down that stretch of road, you are less likely to speed. Well, that means that the process of receiving a ticket or being pulled over and the aversive aspect of that decrease the future occurrence of your behavior. It's something that happened once you engaged in a behavior, so it occurred after that initial demonstration of the behavior, but it decreased in the future. So that's punishment. When we think of punishment, again, we're often thinking of something negative or bad, but there's a lot of things that we want to decrease. And they can also be positive things. Maybe we don't want to interrupt other people, and that's something we set as a goal, and we want to decrease that behavior. So if somebody says to you, hey, thank you so much for listening to me. I'd love to get your thoughts. And that positive statement, that really pleasurable, nice, thankful, gratitude statement that they made came after the behavior. And if the behavior of interrupting is what we are targeting and interrupting decreases in the future, then we could conceptually say that really desired statement essentially meets the definition of punishment. We can get into some of the descriptors and differences, and I'll provide you some additional information about reinforcement and punishment for some self-study as well. Now, let's take an opportunity to hear from Dr. Mary Barbera. She is a board-certified behavior analyst at the doctoral level, a registered nurse, and a mother. She is a mother of 2 boys who are now adults, one on the autism spectrum. Dr. Mary Barbera in this video talks to us about what is the ratio or balance of our positive to negative statements, or how should we deliver reinforcement on a schedule so that individuals are more likely to engage in behaviors in the future. What can we do as instructors, as parents, as caregivers? Let's listen.
Hi, it's Dr. Mary Barbera. If I had to select just one ABA strategy for everyone to use on a daily basis, it would be this one. I learned from Dr. Glenn Latham in the year 2000 that we all need to use 8 positives to every negative in all our interactions. So if you have a child or client with or without autism who's displaying problem behaviors, I want you to take 15 or 30 minutes to watch him and the others around him and create 2 columns on a piece of paper. In the one column, you want to put all the negative comments. Put things like, Johnny, stop that. That's not right. You have to keep working. No, it's not time to use the bathroom. You need to raise your hand. And in the positive column, put statements such as, good job, standing in line quietly, you got all those problems correct, you get extra time on the computer, or simply a smile or a thumbs up. If you are seeing problem behaviors in any child, my bet is that the ratio of positive to negative comments is probably reversed from what Dr. Glenn Latham suggested. Most adults in those situations are probably delivering 8 negatives to every positive. So I want you to work to flip that ratio around to 8 positives to every negative, and the child should be better behaved and happier.
Extinction is the withholding of that reinforcement. So in order to do that, we have to know what's reinforcing, we have to know what's the maintaining function, and then we have to be able to control the environment and withhold it. So a lot of times people think attention. So if the individual is engaged in the behavior to access our attention, we will withhold our attention, right? That just means attention's not available anymore. Well, that works if attention is the maintaining function. But if an individual is trying to escape and we withhold our attention and we don't place the demand, then we are not withholding. We are actually looking at the behavior and we are mismatching it with the function, which is going to impact the effectiveness of our interventions. There's so much more to learn and so much more that I wish to tell you. So I'm going to share with you some of those links. I'm going to embed some of this into our discussion, but I also want you to check out the podcast, ABA Inside Track. Go to behaviorbabe.com. You can also learn by listening to the Behavior Babe podcast or the Behavioral Observations podcast. Go to www.bacb.com, the Behavior Analyst Certification Board. A lot of information is being updated and disseminated in a way that is easy to consume, such as that video we reviewed today. Also, check out www.behavior.org, which is the Cambridge Center for Behavioral Studies. It talks a lot about the different applications of behavior analysis. So to populations and individuals with autism, individuals with intellectual disabilities, sustainability, behavioral safety, organizational management, behavioral gerontology, and much more. Thank you for joining me today on this brief introduction of an overview of the basic defining characteristics, the ABCs of ABA, and the functions, take a seat, of behavior.